Hello. I don't even know how to start this because my hands are still shaking, and I'm running on pure adrenaline right now. My name's Mike, and I thought I was living the perfect life. My wife, Jessica, and I have been married for 9 years. We live in a quiet suburb just outside Dallas, and if you looked at our social media, you'd think we were the poster couple for happiness, weekend barbecues, vacations, and date nights. It was all a lie. Jessica is stunning, charismatic, funny, and the kind of person who could light up a room. People always told me how lucky I was to have her. Honestly, I believed it too. I'm not some Prince Charming. I'm just a regular guy who loves his wife and works a 9 to 5 as an IT technician. Jessica, on the other hand, works in PR. Her job demands long hours, late nights, and a lot of schmoozing at events. I've always been supportive of her career, even when it meant sacrificing our time together. Lately, though, things have been off. It started small. Jessica working later than usual, saying she had last-minute meetings or after-work drinks with clients. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her job's always been hectic. But then there were other signs. New lingerie that I never saw her wear for me, a sudden obsession with going to the gym, and her phone becoming practically glued to her hand. I told myself I was overthinking it. Jessica had never given me a reason to doubt her. But deep down, something didn't feel right. And let me tell you, when that little voice in your head whispers that something's wrong, you should listen. I didn't. That was my first mistake. At first, I convinced myself it was all in my head. I mean, Jessica and I had been together for almost a decade. If she were hiding something, I'd know, right? That's what I told myself every time I saw her texting someone and laughing to herself. I'd ask her what was so funny, and she'd brush it off, saying it was just work stuff, or a group chat with her girlfriends. The excuses started piling up. One night, she came home smelling like expensive cologne. Not hers, not mine. When I asked about it, she laughed and said one of her coworkers had hugged her at a client event. I tried to believe her. I really did. But there were too many little things, all adding up to something bigger. Jessica started putting more effort into her appearance, which wasn't unusual for her line of work, but it felt different. She'd spend hours getting ready for work dinners, wearing dresses I'd never seen before, pairing them with heels she used to complain were too uncomfortable. And then there were the gym sessions. She'd always been fit, but suddenly she was obsessed, hitting the gym 5 times a week, sometimes twice in a day. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. She seemed distant, like she was physically there but emotionally checked out. Our conversations became surface level, filled with empty pleasantries instead of the deep, meaningful talks we used to have. Even our sex life, which had always been great, became almost non-existent. She'd make excuses. She was tired, stressed, not in the mood. I didn't push. I figured she just needed space. But the turning point came one night when I suggested we plan a weekend getaway. Just the two of us. Jessica froze for a moment before plastering on a fake smile and saying, "That sounds great, but I've got so much going on at work. Maybe next month." That's when it hit me. She didn't want to spend time with me. Whatever was going on, I was no longer her priority. I told myself to stop being paranoid, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what yet. It all came crashing down on a random Thursday night. Jessica was at work, or so she said, and I was cleaning out the garage, trying to keep myself busy. That's when I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to find. Her old phone. It was tucked away in a box labeled Donate. Jessica had recently upgraded to the latest iPhone, and I assumed she'd wiped the old one clean. I almost put it back, but that gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't let me. I powered it on, and to my surprise, the phone wasn't locked. First, there was nothing suspicious. Just old photos, random apps, and a bunch of junk emails. But then I opened her messaging app, and my world tilted. There it was, a string of messages with someone named Kyle. Kyle was our neighbor, the guy I'd wave to every morning on my way to work, the guy whose wife, Linda, had brought us cookies last Christmas. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through their conversation. It wasn't just flirting. It was explicit. They'd been meeting up for months, sneaking around while I was at work or out running errands. There were pictures too, selfies taken in places I recognized. Their car, our guest bathroom, and even Kyle's backyard. One message burned itself into my brain. I love how sneaky we are. Poor Mike has no idea. I felt like I was gonna throw up. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely think. I kept scrolling, hoping this was some sick misunderstanding, but it only got worse. Jessica had planned their rendezvous down to the minute, using her work dinners and gym sessions as cover. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife even deeper, I found a message from Linda. Thanks for letting me borrow Kyle last night. You two make such a good team. My blood ran cold. Linda knew. She wasn't just aware of the affair. She was encouraging it. What the hell kind of twisted arrangement was this? I dropped the phone and sat there in the garage, staring at the concrete floor. My entire marriage, my entire life, felt like a joke. But even in my devastation, one thing became clear. I needed a plan. Jessica didn't know I'd found the phone, and I wasn't going to confront her. Yet, if she wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages, those pictures. Jessica's face, smiling in places that should have been ours, and Kyle, the bastard I'd waved to every morning, grinning like he'd stolen something precious. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. But who could I talk to? My family? My friends? It all felt too humiliating. That's when I thought of Linda. She knew about the affair. Hell, she seemed to approve of it. Maybe she could explain what the hell was going on. I waited until Jessica left for work, then walked over to Kyle and Linda's house, my hands shaking as I rang the doorbell. Linda answered in her usual cheerful way, but her smile faltered the moment she saw my face. Mike! Oi! What brings you over? She asked, her voice overly bright, like she was trying to play dumb. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Can we talk? I said, my voice low and firm. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder like she was checking to see if Kyle was home. When she realized he wasn't, she nodded and stepped aside to let me in. I got straight to the point. How long have you known about Jessica and Kyle? Linda froze, her expression shifting between guilt and surprise. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Cut the crap, I snapped, pulling out Jessica's old phone and shoving it in her face. I found the messages. I know everything. For a moment, Linda just stared at the screen. Then, to my shock, she laughed. Oh, Mike, she said, shaking her head. You're so naive. Did you really think Jessica was the perfect wife? That Kyle was the perfect husband. Her words hit me like a slap. What the hell are you talking about? Linda sighed and sank into the couch, gesturing for me to sit across from her. Look, I'll be honest with you. Kyle and we've had an open marriage for years. It works for us, keeps things exciting. But Jessica? She's different. She's not like us. I clenched my fists. So what? You just let your husband sleep with my wife like it's some kind of game? Linda smirked. It's not about letting him. It's about control, Mike. I know everything Kyle does. That's the deal. And honestly, Jessica's just another fling. She's not special to him. Her words twisted the knife even deeper. I felt sick, humiliated, but most of all angry. Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Look, I get it. This hurts. But you're not the only one who's pissed. Kyle's been breaking our rules, lying to me, going behind my back. So here's what I propose. We work together. Work together? I repeated, incredulous. Linda's smirk widened. Yeah, you want revenge on Jessica, and I want revenge on Kyle. Let's make them regret ever messing with us. Ist daher, stumped? The idea was insane, but a part of me, maybe the part still burning with betrayal, wanted to say yes. Think about it, Linda said, standing and walking me to the door. You know where to find me. As I walked back home, my mind raced. Could I really trust Linda? Was teaming up with her the answer? All I knew was that I wasn't going to sit around and let Jessica and Kyle get away with this. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them just how far I could go. I spent the next few days in a haze of rage and disbelief. Jessica went about her usual routine, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. She had no idea I knew about the affair, and I used that to my advantage. I acted normal, or at least tried to. I still couldn't look at her without feeling disgusted, but I had to play the long game. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about Linda's proposition. It was twisted, sure, but she had a point. Jessica and Kyle had torn apart our lives without a second thought. Why should we play fair? I called Linda that evening. "Let's do it," I said without preamble. "Smart choice," she replied, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Meet me tomorrow. We've got work to do." The next day we sat in Linda's kitchen, laying out the groundwork for our plan. She poured herself a glass of wine and gestured for me to sit. "First things first," Linda began, sliding a notebook across the table. "We need to gather as much evidence as possible. Not just texts and photos, everything. Recordings, financials, anything that shows just how low they've sunk." I raised an eyebrow. "Financials?" Linda smirked. "You'd be surprised how sloppy people get when they think they're being sneaky. Credit card statements, unexplained cash withdrawals. It all adds up." I nodded, the wheels in my head already turning. Linda leaned back, swirling her wine glass. "Next, we need a public setting for the reveal. Something that will hit them where it hurts." "Like what?" She grinned, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Leave that to me." Over the next few weeks, we quietly gathered everything we needed. I installed a hidden camera in our guest bathroom, the same place where Kyle and Jessica had been meeting. It felt wrong, invasive even, but I reminded myself that they'd forfeited their right to privacy the moment they started screwing around in my house. It didn't take long to get what I needed. Footage of them kissing, groping, laughing about how clueless I was. Jessica even joked about how easy it was to manipulate me. Linda, on her end, was ruthless. She intercepted Kyle's emails, collected screenshots of their chats, and even managed to get a hold of receipts for hotel rooms they'd booked together. She was a force of nature, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. When we finally had everything, Linda called me over to her house for one last meeting. "Are you ready?" she asked, spreading out all the evidence on her dining table. I stared at the mountain of proof, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "Yeah, I'm ready." Linda grinned. "Good. Because this barbecue is going to be one for the books." "Barbecue?" "Wait," I said, frowning. "What barbecue?" Linda's grin widened. "You'll see. Trust me, Mike. They're never going to forget this." I didn't press her for details. At this point, I was ready for anything. If Jessica and Kyle wanted to destroy my life, they were about to learn the true meaning of destruction. Linda wasn't kidding when she said the barbecue would be unforgettable. She insisted it was the perfect cover, a casual neighborhood gathering where everyone would be relaxed, unsuspecting. I had my doubts, but her confidence was contagious. "It's the ultimate stage," Linda explained, pacing her living room. "We're going to expose them in front of everyone, friends, neighbors, co-workers. Let's see how smug they are when they're the center of that kind of attention." I agreed to play along, though I couldn't shake the knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. This wasn't just revenge. It was a public execution of everything Jessica and Kyle had built. We spent the next week preparing. Linda sent out invites to the entire neighborhood, playing the gracious host. "Just a little get-together," she said with a sweet smile. "We've all been so busy lately. It's time to reconnect." Jessica, oblivious as ever, was thrilled. "That's so sweet of Linda," she said, scrolling through her phone while sipping her coffee. "You know, she's been such a good friend to us." Her audacity made me want to scream, but I kept my face neutral. "Yeah, she's great," I muttered, hiding my contempt. The day of the barbecue arrived, and Linda pulled out all the stops. Her backyard was decked out with fairy lights, picnic tables, and a buffet of food. She even rented a projector, claiming she wanted to show a slideshow of fun neighborhood memories. Jessica and Kyle were all smiles when they arrived, completely unaware of what was coming. Jessica wore a sundress I'd never seen before, probably something she'd bought for him, and Kyle greeted me like we were old buddies. "Mike, good to see you, man," he said, clapping me on the back. I forced a tight smile. "Yeah, you too." The first hour went smoothly, almost painfully normal. People mingled, drank beer, and complimented Linda on her hosting skills. Jessica and Kyle stuck close to each other, whispering and laughing like they shared some inside joke. Finally, Linda clinked her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone, thanks so much for coming. Before we dig into dessert, I thought it'd be fun to take a little trip down memory lane." She gestured to the projector, where a blank screen waited. My heart pounded as she queued up the slideshow, her hands steady on the remote. The first few slides were harmless. Pictures from past neighborhood events, smiling faces, kids playing in the park. Then, without warning, the tone shifted. The next image was a screenshot of a text conversation. "Kyle, you free tonight? Same spot. Jessica, always. Can't wait to see you." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Jessica froze, her smile faltering. What is this?" she stammered, her face draining of color. Linda didn't answer. She just clicked to the next slide. A photo of Jessica and Kyle kissing in my guest bathroom. Gasps filled the air, followed by a low murmur of whispers. Jessica and Kyle's faces were plastered on the screen for everyone to see, their betrayal laid bare. "Turn it off," Jessica shouted, rushing toward Linda. But Linda stood her ground, her smile cold and sharp. "Why? Don't you want everyone to see what a great team you two make?" Kyle tried to intervene, his face red with anger. "This is insane. You can't do this." I finally stepped forward, my voice steady and loud enough to silence the crowd. "Insane?
No, Kyle.
What's insane is screwing your neighbor's wife while pretending to be my friend." The silence was deafening. Jessica's eyes darted around the crowd, her face twisted in desperation. "Mike, please. Save it," I snapped, my anger boiling over. "You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." Linda clicked to the final slide, a recording of Jessica laughing, saying, "Mike's so clueless. He'll never figure it out." That was it, the nail in the coffin. The crowd erupted into murmurs, people shaking their heads in disgust. Jessica and Kyle looked like they wanted to crawl under a rock. Linda, ever the showman, raised her glass. "To truth and transparency," she said, smirking. "Cheers." I didn't stick around to see how the rest of the night played out. I said my piece, made my point. As I walked home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, but also relief. The mask was off, and now it was time for the next phase of my plan. The aftermath of the barbecue was everything I hoped for, and worse than I expected. Jessica and Kyle's humiliation rippled through the neighborhood like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone was talking about it. The betrayal, the photos, the audacity, it was all anyone could discuss. Jessica came home that night after the barbecue, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She slammed the door behind her and marched straight into the living room, where I was sitting with a beer, watching her meltdown with cold detachment. "How could you do that to me?" she screamed, her voice cracking. I didn't even look at her. "You mean, how could you do this to me?" I said calmly, taking a sip. Her anger melted into desperation. "Mike, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like." That made me laugh. A bitter, hollow sound. "Not what it looks like. Really, Jess? You want to try that line after I showed everyone the texts and photos? After hearing you call me clueless?" She flinched, her bravado crumbling. I didn't mean it. I was just caught up in the moment. I love you, Mike. I swear." I stood up, my body trembling with the effort to stay composed. "You love me? Is that why you've been screwing Kyle behind my back for months? Is that why you laughed at me? Humiliated me?" Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "I wasn't thinking. Please, we can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it together." I shook my head, my voice sharp and unyielding. "There's no we anymore, Jessica. You didn't just cheat. You destroyed everything. And now you get to live with the consequences. Jessica fell to her knees, clutching at my pant leg. Please, Mike, I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll never talk to Kyle again. Just don't throw this away. Her desperation was pathetic, but it only fueled my anger. You threw this away the moment you invited him into my house, our house. I leaned down, locking eyes with her. Get out. Pack your things and go. You're done here. She looked up at me, her face crumpling in despair. I have nowhere to go. Figure it out, I said coldly, stepping over her. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. Jessica spent the night crying in the guest room. I stayed in the master bedroom, locking the door behind me. Hearing her sobs didn't make me feel sorry for her. If anything, it reminded me of every moment she had laughed behind my back, every lie she had told to my face. By morning, she was still there, sitting at the kitchen table with puffy eyes and a half-empty mug of coffee. I'll leave, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. But please, Mike, don't make this uglier than it has to be. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Jessica, you haven't even seen ugly yet. This is just the beginning. Her face paled, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Good. She deserved to feel every ounce of it. Jessica wasn't the only one dealing with the fallout. Kyle's life was imploding just as spectacularly, and Linda made sure I was updated every step of the way. 2 days after the barbecue, Linda invited me over for coffee. She seemed almost giddy, her vindictive energy radiating off her. You're going to love this, she said, sliding her phone across the table. On the screen was an email thread between Kyle and his boss. Apparently, word of his affair had reached his workplace. Not surprising, considering half the neighborhood was at the barbecue, and gossip travels fast. His boss didn't mince words. Kyle, your behavior has brought unnecessary attention to our firm. Your actions are unbecoming of a professional in this company. Consider this your formal notice of termination, effective immediately. I smirked as I handed the phone back. Did you send them the footage? Linda grinned. Oh, I might have dropped an anonymous tip. Couldn't let such valuable information go to waste. She leaned back in her chair, looking pleased with herself. He's unemployed, humiliated, and drowning in debt. Serves him right. It wasn't just Kyle's job he lost. His marriage to Linda was officially over. She wasted no time filing for divorce, and unlike Jessica, she wasn't trying to patch things up. She wanted blood. I've got the best lawyer in the state, Linda said, her voice practically purring. Kyle won't walk away with a penny. The house, the cars, even his stupid golf clubs. They're all mine. I couldn't help but admire her ruthlessness. She was taking no prisoners, and it was inspiring. But it got even better. A mutual friend of ours, who worked at the same company as Kyle, told me about his attempt to salvage his reputation. He showed up at the office yesterday, begging for another chance, the friend said over the phone. It was pathetic. He even tried blaming Linda, saying she pressured him into the affair. That made me laugh. Kyle, the smug, self-assured neighbor who thought he could steal my wife and get away with it, was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Jessica was scrambling to figure out her next move. She stayed with a coworker for a few nights, but word quickly spread about what she'd done. People were cutting ties with her left and right. Even her friends are turning on her, Linda said one day, sipping her wine. I heard she showed up at a girls' night, and they practically threw her out. The more I heard, the less I felt sorry for either of them. They thought they could destroy my life and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. As I watched their lives crumble, piece by piece, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more move I needed to make. While Jessica and Kyle scrambled to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, I was working on the final phase of my plan. It wasn't enough to watch their personal lives fall apart. I wanted to ensure their humiliation was permanent, undeniable, and impossible to recover from. Linda was, of course, eager to help. Mike, she said one evening as we brainstormed over drinks. You've already burned them socially and professionally. What's left? I smiled, the idea already forming in my mind. Their reputations. I'm going to make sure the whole city knows exactly who they are. The first step was creating an anonymous email account. From there, I sent out a carefully crafted message to our community's local online forum, the place where everyone went to share news, recommendations, and gossip. The post was simple but effective. To the neighbors wondering what happened at the barbecue last week, here's the truth. Jessica and Kyle have been carrying on an affair for months, sneaking around and lying to their spouses. For those who missed the big reveal, I've attached screenshots and video proof. Feel free to draw your own conclusions. Below the message, I uploaded the damning evidence. The texts, the photos, and the video from the barbecue. Linda was skeptical. Isn't that a little public? What if it backfires? It won't, I said confidently. They've already ruined their lives. This just makes it official. The post went live at 8 a.m. By noon, it had over 1,000 views and hundreds of comments. The responses ranged from shock to outrage to outright schadenfreude. I knew something was off about those two. Jessica always acted so fake. This explains a lot. Kyle deserves everything coming to him. But the real chaos started when local businesses began to chime in. Jessica's employer, a prominent PR firm, issued a statement. We do not condone the behavior of our employees when it reflects poorly on our company. Effective immediately, Jessica is no longer with us. Kyle's gym, where he spent his afternoons flexing and flirting, banned him outright. It's like watching dominoes fall, Linda said, scrolling through the forum. You really outdid yourself. Jessica called me that evening, her voice trembling with rage and fear. How could you do this to me? She screamed. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? Oh, I know exactly what I've done, I replied, my voice cold. You destroyed our marriage, Jessica. Now you get to feel what it's like to have everything taken away. She tried to argue, to play the victim, but I hung up. I didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem. As for Kyle, I didn't hear from him directly, but I did hear about him. He'd apparently been spotted at a bar, drunk and rambling about how everyone turned against him. By the end of the week, both Jessica and Kyle had become pariahs, their names synonymous with betrayal and disgrace. And for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a sense of closure. They thought they could walk all over me. They thought I'd stay silent, that I'd forgive and forget. They were wrong. After my public expose, I thought I was done with Jessica. But she wasn't done with me. One evening, about a week after the forum post went viral, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Jessica standing there, clutching a small suitcase. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen and red from crying. Mike, please, she said, her voice cracking. Can we talk? I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. What's there to talk about, Jessica? You've already said everything I need to know. She shook her head frantically. No. You don't understand. I've lost everything. My job, my friends. I have nowhere to go. I folded my arms. Sounds like a you problem. Her lip trembled as she stepped closer. Mike, I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything we had. But we can fix this. We can start over. I laughed bitterly. Start over? Are you serious? Jessica, you didn't just cheat. You lied to my face, humiliated me, and laughed about it with Kyle. You don't get to come crawling back when your life falls apart. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees, clutching at my hand. Please, Mike, I'll do anything. I'll change. I'll make it up to you. Her desperation would have been pitiful if it weren't so infuriating. You're not sorry for what you did? I said, pulling my hand away. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. She sobbed harder, but I didn't care. I was done being her safety net. You need to leave, I said, my voice firm. Where am I supposed to go? She whimpered. I don't know. Maybe Kyle's place. Oh, wait. Linda threw him out, too, I said with a cold smirk. Looks like you're both homeless now. Fitting, don't you think? Jessica's shoulders shook as she cried harder, but I didn't budge. Finally, she stood up, wiping her face with trembling hands. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice raw. "Maybe," I said, stepping back into the house. "But at least I'll still have my dignity." I closed the door in her face and locked it, leaning against it as I exhaled. The sound of her footsteps fading down the driveway was oddly satisfying. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. Jessica was out of my life and I intended to keep it that way. But I wasn't done rebuilding. The next phase of my plan was about moving forward and leaving her betrayal behind me for good. The next day, it was Kyle's turn to crawl. I got a message from an unknown number. "Mike, it's Kyle. Can we talk? Please, man. Just hear me out." I ignored it. Then he tried again. Another text. "I know I messed up, but you have to understand. Things got out of hand."
I'm sorry.
Sorry? That was rich. The guy who destroyed my marriage wanted pity? The final straw came when he showed up at my house, banging on the door. "Mike, I just want to talk." I opened the door, glaring at him. He looked disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. "What the hell do you want, Kyle?" I asked coldly. Can we fix this?" he stammered. "Linda's divorcing me. I lost my job. I've got nothing left." I smirked. "Good. You earned it." His face fell and he stepped closer. "Man, I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake." "Mistake?" I said, my voice rising. "You didn't trip and fall into my wife, Kyle. Get off my property before I call the cops." He left, muttering under his breath, but I didn't care. He was just another loose end I'd already cut. Linda kept me updated on her divorce proceedings, and it was glorious. "Kyle didn't even try to fight back," she told me over the phone. "I got the house, the cars, and half his savings. He's living in some dingy motel now." She laughed, a sound filled with satisfaction. "Oh, and the best part? His lawyer dropped him after the barbecue video came out. Guess he couldn't handle the embarrassment." I couldn't help but admire Linda's efficiency. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was ensuring Kyle would never recover. "Here's to taking out the trash," I said, raising a beer in mock cheers. Linda smirked. "One piece at a time." A week later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was Jessica's. I debated throwing it away but opened it out of morbid curiosity. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mike, I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, and most importantly, you. I hate myself for what I've done, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Truly, Jessica *. I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, closure. Instead, I felt nothing. I folded the letter, tossed it in the trash, and went on with my day. Some things don't deserve a second chance. With Jessica and Kyle out of my life, I turned my focus to myself. I moved out of the house we once shared and into a new apartment across town. It was small, quiet, and exactly what I needed. I started going to the gym, partly to blow off steam, partly to reclaim a piece of myself. I even took up woodworking, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. The weight of betrayal lifted bit by bit, replaced by a cautious optimism. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. Looking back, the betrayal was a blessing in disguise. Jessica and Kyle's actions broke me, but they also forced me to rebuild into someone stronger. I learned that trust is fragile and that not everyone deserves a second chance. Most importantly, I realized the value of self-respect, something I had let slip in my desperation to hold on to a broken marriage. If you're reading this and going through something similar, here's my advice. Don't ignore the signs, and don't settle for less than you deserve. Betrayal isn't the end. It's a new beginning. Choose to rebuild. I did, and I'm finally free. Bye-bye.